All right, the game we've all been waiting for and the most highly anticipated game for Ole Miss is here. Number 16, Ole Miss hosting number 2, Georgia. All comes down to this for the Rebels. Win this game in the college football playoffs and their first ever playoff appearance very much within reach. You lose, and it probably goes out of the window, at the very least, gets really hairy. A game we cannot wait for, and more on it. We want to welcome back 24th floor Steven Willis, the host of LockedOn Ole Miss. Steven, what's happening with you, man? Appreciate you joining us.
Man, I'm just getting ready to watch some ABC 24 and SEC football at 2:30 on Saturday. I think that's a pretty big game, right?
Yeah,
right. Shameless plug. We appreciate you, Steve. That's why we bring you on the show, man. First and foremost, we know this is going to be a big one, something we've all been kind of anticipating. For you, what sticks out the most? What does Ole Miss have to do in order to get this W?
Well, this has been a weird game all week to me, and I follow some of the Vegas interactions and over games over the course of the weekend. This line for this game has been constantly at 2.5 points all week long. But the fact is, if you look at the stats on that line, Georgia's getting 90% of the money. So the line should be probably 5, 6, 7 points at this point, but it's staying at 2.5. So I asked myself, why? I think it's because they do not trust Carson Beck in the quarterback, especially if it rains. You look at Jackson Dart, who's leading the NCAA right now in passing yards. Carson Beck's having a decent statistical season. If you look at everything, he's got like 17 touchdowns, 11 picks, a little bit high if you look at that total number. But then when you really drill down on it, in games outside of the state of Georgia, let's look at the Texas, the Alabama, and the Florida game. He's got 5 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in those games. I think with the weather that could be coming in, it's probably going to be a little wet during the game tomorrow. You'll see that I think Vegas and everybody trusts Jackson Dart, who we've already seen in one of those monsoon games, and he performed pretty well over Carson Beck. I think the advantage, if it's a wet day, is a Rebel advantage, and I think Ole Miss has the quarterback advantage in this game.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes a ton of sense. I think, like, when you talk about the wet game, that is an interesting thing to me because I think that I understand it advantages Ole Miss in regards to quarterback play, but in regards to the run game, you're going to see a lot of play on the ground, and the Rebels are so depleted in that running back room, which I think makes it really tough. And obviously, we've talked about kind of the trenches and where things are at, and Caleb, we've discussed this, just the two of us as well. Like, right. Stephen, what is your perspective on both the offensive and defensive line and where things are kind of going to go from there in regards to this game and where that's going to lead into the game?
I think that's kind of where the rubber meets the road a little bit in this game. Ole Miss is number 1 in the SEC in rush defense. Ole Miss running the ball offensively. They're depleted, as you said. Georgia might be without Trevor Etienne at the running back position, so they're a little bit depleted as well. They're giving up over 100 yards a game. I can't remember the last year. That's how long it's been that Georgia gave up over 100 yards a game running and rush defense. I think whichever side has the better amount of success running the football and stopping the run, they're going to be all right. If Ole Miss's offensive line can protect Jackson Dart, I think if it's a soggy day, pass rush is difficult. It's more difficult whenever the field is really wet. That's going to take a little bit of the advantage those ends for Georgia might have. So that might help out Ole Miss's offensive line. But whenever you look at it, it's going to be the fact that Ole Miss's defensive line can create explosive plays. They're number 1 in the NCAA in sacks. They're number 1 in the NCAA in tackles for loss. If they can affect Carson Beck with him already having very low confidence, because that's the kind of the thing here. He's not a very confident guy. He's human. If he's been throwing interceptions and the ball's wet and you're playing in a hostile environment and everything's going wrong, it might be a little bit slower. If the defensive line can affect him, that looks very good for the Ole Miss Rebels.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Carson is definitely a guy, he's a pocket passing quarterback, right? If he has the time, his quarterback rating is up there close to 90. I think it's like 89.9. When he's pressured, it falls all the way down to 33, which is not good at all. It's up there like 117th in the country. But you said Ole Miss, the key to success is the trenches. And the key to success is also if Jackson Dart will be protected. And that's a big if. We saw it against LSU. I would say that is the best O-line that Ole Miss has gone up against this year. And it didn't go so well for them. On the flip side of that, you look at LSU's defensive line, they got in the backfield versus Jackson Dart. But the Ole Miss defense had 0 sacks versus LSU. And I would say that this Georgia offensive line, if you take a look at someone like center Jared Wilson, this is going to be the Ole Miss defensive line's toughest test this season. And so I think it's a big if on both sides of the ball. Will they get to will they get to Carson Beck? And will Ole Miss's offensive line, with a couple injuries, we still don't know if that Ole Miss offensive line, right? It doesn't look like they might not be 100% coming into the game. With someone like
with Lane Kiffin, you never know about injuries.
Yeah,
true. You find out when the game starts who's going to play. I mean, the game that he played on the first availability report last night was pretty hilarious, putting like 30 names on the list.
Yeah, I think it's 26 as of last night, and it kind of tends to shorten up. To all of you guys' points, really, there's the list of the questionable out.
It barely even fits on the screen.
It doesn't fit on the
point.
screen.
Yeah.
We've got the lower third over it. You can't even see everybody. But yeah, it was almost laughable seeing what this injury report looked like.
Yeah.
Henry Parrish Jr., to Rachel's point, is not going to be in this game. Matt Jones is doubtful, so should see a lot of Ulysses Bentley in this one, you would imagine. Hopefully, for the Ole Miss offense, their running back room can kind of hold up. I'm really interested in with it going to be a game where it's going to be raining, right? Ole Miss has thrived this year on explosive play. They actually lead the country in explosive plays of 30-plus yards, 40-plus yards, and 60-plus yards. And in a game like this, with a team like this, because they have done so well with these explosive plays, you're talking about taking out chunks of yardage. Can they create some of those explosive plays against a Georgia defense that obviously is incredibly good? And can they convert on third down? In particular, for the Georgia defense, 28% conversion rate on third down. That's 6th in the entire country. If Ole Miss can convert on third down and get some explosive plays, I think you put Kirby Smart in that defense in a bit of a bind. And I think if they can come out firing, you get up 10 points. I think they got to play this game in the driver's seat. If they don't, it could get hairy. What do you think, Steven?
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I'm calling this a two-script game because what Georgia doesn't get enough credit for is how they adjust. And they adjusted last year. The game in Athens was very weird, and obviously Ole Miss was without 2 tackles and their whole transfer portal, but Georgia ended up blowing them out. But one thing that nobody talks about is that Kirby completely adjusted to what Lane Kiffin was doing. Ole Miss went down the field, scored a touchdown. After that, it was just completely tough sledding. I think this should be a two-script game because I think Lane Kiffin's going to have an excellent script at the beginning of the game. He's going to score a touchdown on that first drive like he normally does. But then Kirby's going to make his adjustments and do what he needs to do. It would be kind of interesting if Lane had a second script that was a little bit different to take advantage of what you might be able to do. If you could block the people up front and handle what's going on, kind of use their momentum against them. I think that would be interesting. I do agree that Ole Miss needs to front run in this game if they can get to the third quarter with some sort of a lead in this game. The crowd's going to get into it. All the intangibles that are in play happens, and at that point, Ole Miss is going to be a real threat to win this football game.
Yeah, and I think they've got the keys and the momentum to do that coming off the back of their last 2 wins. I mean, the last 6 quarters together, they put up 79 points. Like, they look just clean cut on offense, and I think we're going to see that kind of come out of the gates, like you mentioned, Steven, probably score on that opening drive and then go from there. The crazy thing to me with all of this is obviously this is a massive, massive game for Ole Miss. They know they need to win this to have a chance at the playoffs. And if they do, in fact, beat Georgia, it'll be Georgia's first loss to a team not named Alabama in 54 games. What a tip of the cap to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss if they are able to achieve, not only because it gives them the option to go to the playoffs, but also you're beating Georgia. Like, this is a massive, massive game for this team. And to me, this is what players drive off. This is something that I imagine every single Ole Miss player is just been living and waiting for this moment, for Georgia week to go and play them and go and make a point. And I can't wait to see what happens because there's so much anticipation. We're saying so many different things can happen, so many ifs, buts, what's going to happen.
They're not going to get a better shot than this, too.
No.
You get Georgia at home. Might be a little bit of a soggy day, so the elements will come into play. That we think almost negates Carson Beck, right, Georgia's quarterback. It'll be interesting to see where this one goes. Saturday at 2:30, like our good friend Steven Willis mentioned. You can watch it right here on ABC 24. Before we go, Steven, I need a score prediction from you, my friend. What you think is going to happen in this one?
I think the weather and the elements and how good both defenses are is going to keep the scoring down a little bit. I think Ole Miss is going to win this game 17-13.
17-13. Rachel?
I'm going Ole Miss 24-21.
All right, I'm saying Georgia 27-20 because Georgia will score most of their points in the second half. They've scored 58% of their points this year in the second half. That's a sign of adjustments, right, Steven? So 27-20 Georgia.
I agree with Rachel. I'm going to say first team to 24 wins. Give me 24-21 Ole Miss. We appreciate Steven Willis for joining us. Steven, we know you do a lot with LockedOn Ole Miss. Where can people find you after the game this week?
You can check me out on the YouTube channel, LockedOn Ole Miss. About 60 minutes after the end of the game, we'll be doing a live stream. We do a live stream then. We do a live stream Sunday night and a live stream on Tuesdays. And the normal LockedOn Ole Miss podcast, you can catch it every Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Check it out.
All right, Mr. Willis, we appreciate you. That is Steven Willis for LockedOn Ole Miss. We will see you next time.